Good afternoon, everybody. It is once again Ted the Speed Learner, and I'm now going to tell you about something called a focal length stop. This is something you would find on cameras, whether you have an old 35mm or you'd have a full-blown digital camera. Okay, now when you're dealing with focal length stop, or what is called an f-stop, you have to think of it this way. You have your film, and of course, if you have an old film camera, it's in a dark spot. Okay, because the very second you expose that film to light, it's exposed, and it can never be changed again. You have to go and recycle it, and the whole 9 yards. Got to get it once again sensitive to light. Now, the way they do that is, I don't know the exact procedure, okay, so don't quote me on this, but I do know that part of it involves silver. The light and the silver the light activates the silver, and it does a little process, and that's how you get your. So film actually has silver in it. Yeah, so if you have some old time film and you can extract that silver out of it, you can sell it. That's why photo labs have these things called silver recovery units, because you don't want to drink a ton of silver. Not a good thing. Not very healthy. Anyway, when you have the film in your camera, of course, it's a dark camera, then the distance between where the lens of your camera is and the film that's inside your camera is called the focal length. Okay? And what you do is you're going to adjust the focal length stop in order to take your pictures a certain way. Okay? Now, I'm not going to get into a lot of details on this, but at least you now know what the focal length stop is. Now, later on, I will get into a lot of details, so this is just the beginning. All right? Now, when you're talking about the lens of a camera, you're talking about an iris and an aperture. Now, the aperture is the actual hole in which light goes through in order to hit the film. Now, the thing is, with digital cameras, they have those CCD sensors, and I talked about this in a previous video, the CCD sensor. Okay? And so, instead of film, you have this sensor. All right? So, the light, instead of hitting a roll of film, it actually hits the sensor. And I explained that in a previous video. And that's, by the way, that's a charge-coupled device, if you want to know. All right. Now, the aperture is the hole. Now, what controls how big or small the hole is something called the iris. Now, this is not the iris. People get this confused with the iris plant. Okay. There is an iris flower, but it is not to be confused with the iris on a camera, although both things come from the same source. Apparently, there was this pagan goddess named Iris, and she used to ride on rainbows. Okay? So, therefore, iris plants being of such a multiple amount of colors. And then you have the iris in your eye. Yes, your eyes have irises too. And because the iris of your eye is in multiple colors, ever wonder why your eyes? Some people have blue eyes, some people have green, some people have, well, if they get really bad at it, they have red eyes. But anyway, that's why they have colors in their eyes. Some people are brown, some people are black, some people are blue, and some people are green in eye color. Well, that's your iris. Okay. Same thing with a camera. Okay. The camera has a mechanism that shrinks down or enlarges the aperture, and that's called the iris. So, after knowing this, you now know that there is such a thing as an iris, an aperture, a focal length stop, otherwise known as an f-stop. Okay, and this affects how much light actually hits the film. Now, the difference between that and the shutter is this. The shutter, okay, affects how long that light stays on the film or on the sensor. The longer that shutter is open, the longer that light stays on the sensor. or on the film. The shorter amount of time that shutter is open, the less time it stays on the film. Okay? And these two mechanisms together affect how your picture looks. So that's why you have to adjust your shutter speed and your focal length stop, or your f-stop, to get the right lighting for your pictures. And this is directly true of fluorescent lights. So when you're dealing with fluorescent lights in an enclosed space, you know, you go indoors, you have these fluorescent lights trick cameras. It looks all nice and lighty, but to the camera it's not. So what you have to do is you have to use your iris to open the aperture wider in fluorescent light, and you have to have a slower shutter speed, or otherwise your pictures are going to look black. And that's not what you want. And I see this all the time. I see people, they'll go to concerts and whatever, and they'll take these wonderful pictures, and it's just nothing. And they're like, why is that? Well, because you didn't adjust your shutter speed, and you didn't adjust your focal length stop to compensate for the fluorescent lights. Oh. There you go. Okay. Now, I will get deeper into this in a future video, but for now, at least you know that shutter speed, which is the amount of time the film actually gets the light, or the sensor gets the light, and the aperture affecting how much light actually gets into that camera, combination of the two makes the difference between a good picture and a bad picture. Alright, I will tell you more in a future video, so stay tuned.